Good evening and welcome. I'm Denise Foy. I'm both a Chicago resident and a member of the board of directors of SAGE, the nation's oldest and largest organization dedicated to improving the lives of our LGBT elders. So I'm really proud and excited to share with you some of the work of this remarkable organization and our impacting of the lives of both our community nationally and right here in our Chicagoland and Midwest area. First, I want to thank everyone who's made this night happen. As anyone who's produced or even participated in a virtual event, which I think by now we're all over meetinged out, you know this is really no small feat. We want to thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule tonight to be with us this evening. If you tuned in a few minutes early, I hope you enjoyed a walk down our memory lane provided by the pictures from some of our events over the past years. It's hard to think that it was 2 years ago when we were together right around this time here in Chicago in a really great space with a whole bunch of people, but we're here together tonight. And so we want to let you know that if you have a question at any point during our discussions or whatever, just put them in the live chat and we'll get to them during our question and answer period. I'm running through tonight's program just to let you know what's going to happen is we have two recurrent themes. The first one is partnership. SAGE works with peer organizations to ensure that our community's elders are included, respected, served, and that the needs of our specific community are addressed. To be clear, the partners we elevate tonight are a mere fraction of those with which we play well. Local partners include Equality Illinois, the Center on Halsted, West Suburban Senior Services, Alphawood Foundation, and One Roof Chicago, to name but a few. Beyond Chicago, some of our Midwest partners include the Spirit on the Lake in Minneapolis, A Place for Us, which is the first LGBT-friendly senior housing community located in Cleveland, Ohio. Our second theme tonight is going to be COVID-19, SAGE's response to it, the ways the pandemic has affected our existing programs, and the ways it's going to shape our programs going into the future. And even this pandemic, our advocacy efforts resulted in the passage of an LGBT-friendly Older Americans Act, the only, and let me repeat, the only LGBT-inclusive bipartisan piece of legislation enacted during the entire Trump years. This would be very interesting to hear about this. Tonight's program is going to be divided into three parts. We're first going to talk about our tremendous legislative achievements of the SB 1319, which marks the LGBTQ older adults and people living with HIV as target populations in aging programs funded through the Federal Older Americans Act, and SAGE's work in making that happen. We'll then transition into a conversation on SAGE's National Housing Initiative and its impact in Chicago and on the greater Midwest. In part three, I'll be joined by SAGE's CEO, Michael Adams, for a conversation about what's on SAGE's horizons and to get his response to some questions you might have in the chat. So I'm going to finish talking for a moment anyway, and we're going to turn the first part of our evening over where we're going to focus on our historic legislative accomplishment of SB 319. And here to discuss that is our CEO, Michael Adams, who's going to be joined by Paula Basta, the director of the Illinois Department on Aging, and 216 LGBT Hall of Fame inductee activist Kim Hunt. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael, Paula, and Kim.
Okay, thank you so much, Denise. It is
Thanks, Denise.
Really, really great to be here. I am so excited to be able to kick off this conversation with Paula Basta and Kim Hunt, two really legendary leaders and activists in LGBT plus aging work. And what we're going to be talking about in this section is really a story about how to make game-changing progress through partnership, through teamwork, right, through working together. And the progress we're going to be talking about here is work we've been doing to prioritize LGBT plus older adults in elder services and older adult services, which is so essential given the very severe challenges so many of our elders face. Now, at the federal level, SAGE has worked for years to try to accomplish this goal, which would mean getting LGBT plus older folks designated as a population of greatest social need under the Federal Older Americans Act. Unfortunately, and we'll talk about this later, while we've made some good progress on the Older Americans Act, we have not been able to get that federal designation, which is so important. Too often the federal government really pulls up the rear, right? Pulls up the rear when it comes to progress for our communities. And very often it falls to the states, right? It falls to the states to be the leaders on this. And that's why SAGE, Equality Illinois, the Pride Action Tank, which Kim heads, and other partners came together several years ago to talk about how we could collaborate to make Illinois the very first state in the country to designate LGBT older adults a population of greatest social need. And I'm so pleased to share with our audience that through smart strategy, through hard work, and through teamwork, we accomplished that critically important goal, right? When SB 1319 was enacted into law in 2019, it prioritizes not only LGBT older people with greatest social need designation, but also older adults living with HIV in Illinois' programs and services for older adults. The impact, which we're going to be talking about now, is tremendous, both for LGBT older folks living in Illinois, but also as a model for other states across the country, which hopefully will follow in Illinois' footsteps, and as a model for the federal government. So with that bit of background, it's really my pleasure at this point. I want to kick the lead in this conversation over to Paula and Kim. And let me just kick off the discussion. Let me ask you a question. As sweet as it was to win this legislative victory, I think we've talked about the fact that this is just the beginning of our work, and these victories only make a difference to the extent that we bring them to life. So I'd love to have each of you talk about what this victory means on the ground, right, for people on the ground in Illinois, and what are you able to do as a result of this victory that you couldn't do before? So Paula, Kim, whichever one of you wants to start, go for it.
Well, thanks.
I'm going to defer to Paula.
Because you see me nodding like this.
I see you raring to go.
This extrovert. Can I just say, though, those pictures when we opened up tonight's town hall, this extrovert's heart I leapt. I remember 2 years ago just getting that SAGE award, but also being with all of you and all of our good friends and partners, and I cannot wait till we can all be gathered together in person again. So all that being said, what does SB 1319, what did it mean to us? And I think in Illinois, what I want to talk about is what the bill has done and will do, hopefully throughout this year, but going forward in the years to come. It basically is going to help educate and then highlight to our service providers throughout the state of Illinois the importance of including our LGBTQ population in everything that we do in our programming. And so that's why it's important, right? Again, we know that basically that nearly half of the people in the United States living diagnosed with HIV are going to be 50 years old or older. So they're our population of how we serve the older adults in Illinois as well. So I just want to highlight that. I also want to say that this bill did protect Illinoisans from discrimination in assisted living and in shared housing facilities. Very key, very key. And we're very proud of that. And that Governor Pritzker signed that bill very quickly. So I know that that's kind of a kickoff. I do think that I have to give my counterpart, Kim Hunt, a little bit of credit here and give her some time to talk. So Kim.
Take it away, Kim.
I'm so happy to be here tonight with everybody, and always love to share a stage with Paula. I think from an advocate point of view, one of the biggest hurdles, right, is to get a population named as existing in the first place, and then to be able to leverage that recognition with additional programs and supports that specifically for that population. So that's sort of a big piece for us from the advocacy side for SB 1319. It's also been a way for us to really help LGBT older adults recognize that they have rights, that every time we talk about SB 1319 in the context of trainings for LGBT older adults, they are amazed to know that this law exists, and it really sort of lifts their spirits around any fears or hesitations they have about getting services from organizations as they age. Doesn't completely eliminate it, because there's a lot of work to continue to do. But just having that recognition has been huge.
Great, great, super. It's a great kind of laying the table here. Paula, let me ask you about something. Our collaborations, our work together, obviously keeps rolling on, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the training collaboration between SAGE and the Illinois State Office for Aging that you lead. I understand it's a big initiative that's going to impact the entire state. Would just love to hear you talk a little bit about it.
So in 20, I think of everything pre-COVID, post-COVID, and then post-COVID, because we're getting to post-COVID, right? So that's
getting there.
But pre-COVID, we actually worked with your team at SAGE, at the state of Illinois, the Illinois Department on Aging. And we are a smaller state agency, 155 employees, but we are a $1.4 billion budget for a state agency. And we wanted to make sure that when Governor Pritzker had appointed me as the director of the Illinois Department on Aging, and as an out lesbian, the only one I think in the country, I am very honored to talk about how important our community is to our services and to what that means. And Kim alluded to it too, which is we want to be named. We want to make sure that in our LGBT, that in our forms, our intake forms, that they are completely inclusive of us, of our relationships, of our lives, of our loves, of the things that we have experienced. And so to that end, the Illinois Department on Aging went through at the end of 2019 and into 2020, a whole 3 months of training with SAGE. And basically, I think we got our platinum sponsorship. We actually have that now. 100% of our staff has been trained, and all of our providers throughout the state of Illinois, because of what SAGE did for us. And of course, making the training free was wonderful. So we really loved, I'm government here, right? So IDOA, but your partnership with us and continues. But also, we know that training is the tip of the iceberg. We know also that we're going to go in for the next round of training with you all, and that's coming up in 2021. I think it's the end of I think the summer is what we're planning. So we have it on our website as well, so that people know that we are one of the state agencies throughout the country that has been trained by SAGE. So we have this nice little emblem at the end of our website. So we want to make sure people know that. I'm trying to think what else can I tell you about the training?
No, that's great.
It continues, and it's so important.
Can I jump in here right quick?
Jump in. Yeah, absolutely.
I want to acknowledge something. Paula being perhaps the only out LGBT person running a cabinet level aging department is huge. But as she continued to talk, what was also important is representation, while important, is not enough, right? Paula is actually doing the work that is required to build awareness and change hearts and minds, honestly, around the fact that there are LGBTQ folks and folks living with HIV who are aging and are in some of the facilities that the state has purview over.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. It's huge. I want to lift up something you both have raised, because I'm just struck by it, right? You both talked about the importance of being named, the importance of being recognized. And it makes me think about SAGE's tagline, which is "We refuse to be invisible," right? Because for so long, the marginalization of older folks in our communities, and for all of us in our communities, was really about being made invisible, right? Being treated as though we didn't exist, right? And so this naming isn't everything, but when your oppression has been tied to invisibility, it's such an important first step. And Kim, I want to ask you, I mean, clearly there is a lot more work to be done.
Yeah.
How would you describe our collective agenda? You're on the ground, you're running the Pride Action Tank. Like, how would you describe the collective agenda we have moving forward?
Yeah, it's interesting you should ask this. So I know you're involved a little bit with the American Society on Aging, and the conference is happening right now. And we presented on some of our work this afternoon. And, as we talked about earlier, there's a lot more work to do. So, part of it is being named. Training continues to be important. Paula mentioned changing the forms to even be able to recognize LGBT folks. And one of the things that we've been working on, and this came to us through SAGE, was a SOGI data collection. And we've got a bill live right now that initially came to us as an older adult issue, but we recognize that it's broader than that. So so that's one piece of it. And then I think changing culture is another part of it. And so the trainings, as Paula has alluded to, can't be one off. It has to be ongoing and it has to become a practice. And one benefit that we have had of working with SAGE over and over again is that you see what's happening across the country and can bring those models here, even though we're creating models here in Illinois and other parts of the Midwest, the synergy that you're able to provide just because you know what's happening nationally. And because we have a relationship, that coming to us and be modified in the way that we've been able to modify has been huge.
Yeah, I want to pick up on something you just said. It's so important. I mean, it cannot be overstated how important it was for Illinois to enact this legislation as the first in the country. And so many other states across the country in the Midwest region and elsewhere have looked to Illinois. And part of what they're looking at, obviously, is the legislation, is the greatest social needs designation. But I think they're also looking at how we work together, right? Like how we work together as a coalition, a national organization, SAGE, local advocates, state advocates. What would you say? Let's start with you, Paul. We've got, I think, a couple of minutes left. Like, what would you say about like if you look inside how that coalition sausage is made? What's the sauce that makes this collaboration work?
Well, I think it's education and advocacy that is at the core and the heart of both Illinois Department on Aging and in our mission statement of what we do, just in general for older adults throughout the state of Illinois. We want to make sure that they have the best quality of life as they grow older in the state of Illinois. And so in order to be to have the best quality, we want to make sure that we're doing person-centered planning, person-centered programming, that we're highlighting who a whole person is. And if you do that, and if you try to do it well, and I think we try, we have a lot to do, no doubt about it. In fact, but I also want to say a big shout out. Someone in the chat said he's from Normal, Illinois. I want to say, hey, Normal, Illinois, welcome. I mean, I'm happy about my Chicago peeps being here, but I like to give this map, and I know you guys are going to laugh at me because I'm a visual person, but here, this is the whole state of Illinois. We got to be looking for all of our LGBT peeps everywhere in the state.
Yep.
And so I want to say, how does that look? How do we do it? Advocacy, education, that we know that we want to be recognized and that we're going to be able to give the best quality of life to everyone, whoever they are and whoever they love.
Right.
Kim, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, this COVID moment has showed us that we really have to do a better job of taking care of each other. And to Paula's point, we've got a whole state here. We've got the whole Midwest. There's so many points of connection we can make virtually. We can build out when we get past this moment. And I just want to point out that part of the other secret sauce is the relationship, right?
Yeah.
SAGE doesn't go away after the legislation has been passed. We continue to work with SAGE regularly on legislation, but also just to know what's happening and to continue education efforts in the state of Illinois.
Let me ask about something else. And you mentioned, Paula, our friend from Normal, Illinois, and the fact that we're everywhere. In fact, there was an AARP national survey of LGBT older folks that came out a couple of years ago, and it showed that 29% of LGBT older people are living in rural areas, 29%.
Yeah.
And that 9 out of 10 of them report that they have zero access to any kind of LGBT welcoming services as they age. So I'd love to hear, starting with you, Paul, and then you, Kim, as well. Like, how do we crack that nut?
Well, I do think it's through our AAAs. I think it's through our area agencies on aging because they receive the funding from IDOA that gives them those the funds to do their programming every single day that's on the ground. When we were able to do like congregate dining sites and some things that we've had to kind of close down and make virtual
Yeah.
now, but you know, we're in this COVID world that we're trying to traverse and travail through, and we're not sure where it's affected everybody. But I want to say that it's going to be up to us, and I'm happy to give in the chat our 1-800 number, because again, I see Gary just said again he's from Normal, Illinois, and we will and we can talk to our AAAs and say that there should be and will be culturally competent programming going on wherever in the state you live. For example, too, if you live in the suburbs of Illinois, in our Age Options is a great AAA. They're doing Thrive Cafes, which are memory cafes, but they're geared to LGBTQ older adults. I mean, there are programming that we can do and is going on and doing throughout the state of Illinois that is just specifically for our LGBT elders. And sometimes that's fine too. We just want to be with our own, and that's good. But I think that you should know you are not alone, that is not something, even if you are in rural Illinois, that we still are on to give you the best service that we can to help you have the best quality of life that you should have. And nobody, you know, we're here for you. And I don't want anybody to think that that's not happening. It's happening in different ways in different areas. Some AAAs have partnerships with different agencies that are locally based. Some people have also their platinum SAGE sponsored trainings that they've gone through. Springfield, Illinois is actually going to be starting. Actually, I'm going to be talking with them next week to do some kind of LGBT older adult programming specific. So we're very excited about Springfield. Shout out to them. So I think there's all kinds of things, and I'm happy to help any way I can, especially for the folks listening that are in the state of Illinois.
Kim, I want to give you the last word, and I want to bring in the other intersections, right? We talked about how hard it is for LGBT elders in rural areas, but obviously we have many LGBT elders who are members of people of color communities, we have trans elders, etc. How do we bring those intersections together and make sure we're advocating and doing this work for everybody?
Yeah, those intersections are real. And as I talk about LGBTQ work, I remind folks that that rainbow is big and has a lot of different intersecting identities in it. And so we can't just have one identity in our minds when we talk about LGBTQ. So, and I heard this at the conference earlier today, is when you think about the statistics that you share, think about all the different layers of folks and their identities that are encompassed in that statistic, and break that out a little bit to see what the impact is for people of color or trans people of color, you know, all the different combinations. We have everybody under the LGBTQ rainbow, and we have to work from a more holistic fashion when it comes to LGBTQ work and think about all those identities.
Thank you, Kim. I think that's a beautiful way to wrap up this session. Thank you, Paula. You're amazing.
Can I just say one thing? I just
absolutely.
read yesterday. Okay. I just read, somebody sent me, one of my staff sent me this thing from Decatur, Illinois, that they have just put on the local public school board the first transgender African-American person. So,
amazing.
I mean, come on, Central Illinois is rocking it.
Amazing.
There you go. There you go.
All right, so, all the good stuff going on. Thanks.
Yeah. So the three of us warned the program organizers there was no way we were going to keep to our time. So with that, we're going to pass it back over. Thank you all so much. Amazing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Kim, Paula, Michael. That was a really great walkthrough of what it took to accomplish, you know, this legislative achievement, and painting a picture of how we're going to have a more equitable future and how this legislation really makes it possible. You know, our present moment on this journey, if we think about this, what we've talked about in the last few minutes, was really at one time unfathomable, probably to all of our pioneers and perhaps many of us watching today. I do know that there's still a really long way to go, but leaders like you probably, you know, give us, Paula, Kim, Michael, you give us great hope and inspiration to keep working and keep making the LGBTQ community visible. So for many of us, I'm going to switch gears a little bit here now. COVID-19 pandemic for all of us has brought more urgent needs to the fore. And we've all read the papers, we've all seen what's going on. One of the needs that SAGE addresses is housing. And the imperative for equity is rendering itself visible by the need for fair and equal access to housing, specifically for LGBT older adults all across the country, and obviously here in Chicago and in the Midwest. Tonight, we have really two special guests to discuss SAGE's commitment to securing housing for our LGBT elders, and they are Sydney Kopp Richardson, SAGE's National LGBT Housing Initiative Director, and she's joined by Pamela Calvert here from Chicago, the founder of One Roof. So I'm going to turn the program over to the two of you.
Hi, everyone. Well, I'm a Midwesterner. Chicago's close to my heart. It's where my activism began. It's where I'm from. My name is Sydney. And again, I'm the director of our National Housing Initiative, also known as the NHI. And at the NHI, we work to create and support a continuum of housing interventions for folks across the country. We have built housing. We conduct technical assistance, trainings, advocacy. We host annual housing symposiums. And this May, with the generous support of the Weinberg Foundation and co-hosted by Hinshaw and Culbertson and Leading Age, we'll be hosting the first of our series of regional roundtables, platforming this work in Chicago, also featuring Kim Hunt, who we just heard from. The dates for this free virtual roundtable will be May 11th and May 13th at 1 p.m. Central, so keep an eye out. And there will also be networking opportunities for folks across the Midwest. One of the groups that have made this roundtable series possible is One Roof Chicago, and here from One Roof is founder co-chair, the brilliant Pamela Calvert. One Roof is an emerging initiative to build an affirming intergenerational community for elders and youth that are most in need of housing that we're talking about, and meaningful connection as well as career development. I'm honored to be in conversation with Pamela tonight as a colleague, a co-conspirator, and also a fellow Kiwi. So Pamela, welcome. You are an innovator. Can you explain a little bit about your work in Chicago? What is it about your work that's unique, innovative, truly moving the needle, and how we develop and dream about housing?
Sure. Well, as anybody who's listening to this call knows, we have some real crises at both ends of the age spectrum, in our community. At the one end, for our seniors, there's this well-founded apprehension about moving into senior communities, both because of institutional bias, whether you can even be admitted or not, or, whether it's being hated on by the people in your community. With our people, HIV positive folks, as Paula just said, 50% are over the age of 50 years old. And then at the other end of the age spectrum, for our youth, 30 to 40% of our of homeless young people identify as LGBTQ. So society is really failing our community at both ends of the age spectrum. And so One Roof Chicago is looking at this as an integrated problem rather than as two separate problems. And we're saying, what if we were to build a community that really addresses the needs of both, under one roof? And so, we're on our own. This is the same situation we faced as a community so many other times, and we've had to solve our problems on our own. We're going to be having 80 units of senior housing, 20 units of permanent supportive housing for young adults age 18 to 29, and a job training program on site in elder care for the young people living in our community. And this is important because, within the whole senior care area, there's this huge labor shortage. And so anyone entering this as a profession is going to have a guaranteed career ladder. In addition, having people who are trained from our community, in our community, to serve our community is going to be golden, for all of us. What's unique about the project, we're planning on building on the south or west sides of Chicago. It's going to be a mixed income development. And that's important because, bias is no respecter of wallets. We have, things happening in Niles, with Marsha Wetzel, in St. Louis, with Bev and Mary. We see this happening in market rate communities. So we need to, have our own space. And having a continuum of care. Both the Pennycuff Apartments and Town Hall are independent living only, so that when you need to, have support with your activities of daily living, you're back sort of into the general market again, only you're that much more vulnerable. we want to be able to provide more support on site for our residents as they get more frail. Combining elders and young people together and having on-site job training. So, and I think that we're also unique in having Kim Hunt on our board. So that's kind of also.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you, Pamela. So, we've been talking about this culture shift. Bills create policies, but they also help shift culture and norms. So with this new designation of older adults with HIV and LGBT plus older populations as greatest social need, how does this impact our work? How does it lay the context for what you are doing on the local level?
Sure. Well, we can't build our way out of this problem. We can build 80 units of senior housing, but obviously that's not going to move the needle in certain respects as far as the overall problem of bias for our community. And so, as Paula and Kim so rightly pointed out, being able to show, that this is an issue, across the state, across the board, and really address it in a holistic way is absolutely critical. I think that things like this will push the mainstream into recognizing that this is actually a problem. And not only that, but that they have, exposure on litigation and liability. And sometimes it takes that to get people to actually focus up and pay attention. It also shows why a project like One Roof Chicago is really needed. This is, as Michael pointed out, with SAGE's motto being we refuse to be invisible. This is the first out and proud generation, and we're not going to go back into the closet when we enter into senior care. So being able to have legal protections to back that up, like SB 1319 is absolutely critical. And it's also for us at One Roof Chicago being able to count on that kind of teeth in the system is really important for us in working with partners in the mainstream, because we're not going to be able to provide every kind of service to our residents. We're going to be relying on external partners, and those partners are going to get the kind of training from SAGE and others that 1319 enables and actually kind of mandates.
Well, this is really exciting. And, in the NHI, we lift up the work of One Roof Chicago and often reference your work. There's a project that's in development in Cincinnati right now. We're working with folks across the Midwest, and this is really a really beautiful model. So we are so excited about it. Can you talk a little bit about our work together and any, impact the NHI has had on you and your work?
Yeah, SAGE is our first. And it's SAGE to kind of set the bar for like anyone who wants to partner with us. We're like, okay, this is SAGE. They have been, you have been absolutely critical to the work that we've done from the very beginning. Kelly Kent, your predecessor, opened his Rolodex. And, as far as he was concerned, I was the nobody sent, but that didn't make any difference whatsoever. I was brand new to Chicago, and like, hello, I've got this idea. And he's like, let's talk. And, he was providing things like, Paula has her props, I have mine, this wonderful understanding the affordable housing development process resource, key considerations in developing LGBT-friendly, service-enriched, affordable housing. You don't even want to look at the kind of highlighting I've got going on in those kinds of resources. SAGE vetted development partners all over the country. There's like a spreadsheet of we have evaluated potential development partners for senior housing, and these are the ones that we in effect endorse. And I didn't even look at anyone else besides the development partners that SAGE had already done the spade work to vet. And so we ended up with this wonderful partner, Full Circle Communities, directly as a result of the research work SAGE had done. Kelly introduced us to Mike Jacobs, awesome guy at the National Equity Fund. They provided us with our very, 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 very first seed money, and there'll be our low-income housing tax credit syndicator. So all of this was just a huge shot in the arm getting us to moving forward. So then Kelly leaves SAGE, and I have like complete separation anxiety. He will attest to this. I was like, no, you cannot leave. But then SAGE hired you. And I mean, come on, like superstar upon superstar, and, your work, we have been, sort of embraced into this community of practice through the Elder Housing Symposia starting 2 years ago. And, that's been a fantastic, we feel like, we're part of a whole national community moving forward on this. And then on an individual board member level, people like Bruce Letterman have been incredible thought partners for just sort of like walking through the regulatory stuff, the, reality test stuff, things like how much of a continuum of care can we offer? What are the things we should be thinking about? All of that. Bruce has been amazing. So, Sage, as I say, I am the big fan of Sage.
Well, the feeling is mutual. So thank you, Pamela. I'm blushing. So where are you at today? Can you speak a little bit about, where you and your dynamic team are going and what needs to happen along the way? Developing housing is not an easy task. Who needs to support this? What are the roadblocks? How do we get past them? Where are you at?
Sure. Well, last year, Corona, I won't lie, it slowed us down. It slowed everybody down. It slowed the universe down. But we have delivered our summary project specifications to our development partner. The architect is working on preliminary designs, which is really exciting, pictures. And so later on this spring, we think we're going to be having a meeting at City Hall, to talk about our priorities compared to, what are priorities from the city around South and West Side development, around transit-oriented development, things like that, where there's a real, mutuality of purpose. As far as roadblocks that I'm looking at right now, there's a couple. Everyone talks about how mixed income housing is something that like everybody loves, but they make it really difficult from a financing standpoint, especially if you're going for public financing, like low income housing tax credits. If you want to have any kind of market rate apartments, in your development, they make it really hard to get low income housing tax credits. And so, for all intents and purposes, then your mixed income housing is, really hard. It's hard to thread the needle. So why is that important to us? For one, why is mixed income housing important? As we've seen, with people like Marsha Wetzel and Bevan Mary, we have the same problems of bias in market rate communities as we have in affordable housing. So for our population, having housing that's focused on our needs is as important at the market rate as it is at the affordable housing level. Also, I think within the LGBTQ community, there's more sort of cross-class relationship than you might find in other senior housing communities that are more sort of economically segregated. And I think that that's not as characteristic of the LGBT community, although Lord knows we have our, issues of classism, et cetera. But I think that for us, having a mixed income community is something that is more of a priority. And so, that's something that we're trying to, if there's a way to thread the needle, we need to find a way to do that. It makes the deal hairier. I'm using a term of art within housing finance. But that's why we need someone like Mike Jacobs, to really work with us on creative opportunities to like find the way through. That said, the more private financing, the more private funding we bring to the table, the fewer constraints we have on how, on who we can and cannot allow to live in our community. So if there's any sort of venture philanthropists or social investors listening to this call, talk to Sage, hook us up, we will be more than happy to talk to you about, what the options are. The second thing that I could see as a sort of like challenge that we have to overcome is the question of the continuum of care. Both Town Hall, as I said, and the Pennycuff apartments are independent living only. And so, we see people having to move out when they need more, more support with activities of daily living. That's really difficult to take, that at the moment when our seniors get to be more frail and more vulnerable, that they're back into the same system that we're trying to provide shelter and safety from, and so that's something we're trying to, okay, let's provide more. However, getting a SLIF license in Illinois is difficult to the point of impossibility, is what we've sort of been advised. And so we have to find some creative solutions to that, because I don't want our residents to be moving, to have to lose their home when they need us the most. So those are sort of the two areas that we're sort of like trying to find, how are we going to get through this? And we know that we can, because we're creative folks, and this is a creative community, and we've come up with creative solutions before.
Absolutely. And, I think we're unfortunately out of time. I could talk with you forever. But I really want to thank you for being here with us. I think, one thing we're going to talk about aspirationally, foreseeing one roof everywhere. I already see this as such a model.
One
that
roof
is
in
so,
one roof in
yes.
bridge.
So it's growing and growing. People are learning more and more about this, and I'm so excited to platform your work. If
Thank
folks
you so
want to
much.
learn more, we will also be talking about this at the May 11th and May 13th regional roundtables at 1 p.m. Central. You can contact myself for more information. And I'm sorry I wasn't always watching the chat, but we can, share our information if you want to get in touch more closely about One Roof. And One Roof is one of a number of partnerships SAGE is engaged in throughout the Midwest and nationally to create and secure housing opportunities for LGBT elders. We also work closely with what was mentioned, the Center on Halstead, the Town Hall Apartments. We're providing TA to a new project in Cincinnati, which I mentioned. We've platformed the work of LGBT trailblazer Barbara Sattin's project Spirit on Lake in Minneapolis. And we're working with new groups across the country who look to folks like One Roof as a replicable model for housing LGBT elders. So thank you so much again, Pamela, and thanks to you all for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sydney and Pamela. Pamela, wow, great work. One Roof Chicago, go. We're so grateful for all your wonderful work and SAGE supporting you and making sure our elders have safe and affordable housing that's welcoming, affirming, and they have a true sense of having a home. So now I'm going to be joined by SAGE's CEO, Michael Adams, and we're going to go through a couple of questions, and then we'll have some time for the questions that come through the chat. So Michael, it seems pretty clear that life after COVID won't look like it did before the onset of the pandemic. I think we're all used to, like, we're getting our heads around that. The very experience of navigating through the pandemic really made SAGE, make changes, adapt to the new situations, responding in the aftermath. And while we're right at this moment of pivoting where the vaccines are going to become more available, there's a couple of things I think our audience would like to know is, like, what are your takeaways from the whole past year? And then how do you think SAGE's program services and our advocacy are going to look different than before the pandemic hit?
Yeah, that's a great question, Denise. And, I guess what I'd start by saying is the pandemic put this incredibly powerful spotlight on the notion that we're going to have to do a lot more to disrupt disparities. And let me say a little bit about what I mean by that. At SAGE, we have often said that LGBT older folks have been at the epicenter of the pandemic, not only because of their age and underlying health conditions, but also because of other really important things like very, very high levels of social isolation. I noticed we've had this incredibly robust exchange going on in the chat, and I saw one of our viewers tonight say that he feels isolated even within our own community, right, as he gets older. So LGBT older folks have been particularly affected by the pandemic, and that's even more true for LGBT older folks who are Black and brown people more generally, who've been much more likely to get sick and to die during this pandemic. And so one big takeaway is the need to really break through those disparities, right? To really focus at the intersection and focus in particular and especially on the needs of LGBT plus elders of color, of trans elders, of elders in rural communities. Second big takeaway is about, and was related to the first, is about the very tight connection between promoting health and dismantling structural racism. If we want to promote health for our community, we have got to tackle structural and systemic racism, because clearly the pandemic has shown just how closely those two are linked together. Third big takeaway for us, it's going to have a big impact on SAGE's programs, is the transformative role that technology can play in building community and building connections and improving quality of life. We've learned that by force, right? All of a sudden, overnight, SAGE's programs, our affiliate programs across the country, these vital in-person programs, they had to shut down, right? And so we had to pivot overnight to virtual programs that people could come into online. We launched a national telephonic support program using technology to help isolated LGBT older folks. We launched a online financial planning and support platform for folks who are really in trouble that way. The pandemic forced us to do all those things, and what we learned in the process is that there's so much we can do with technology, right? So even once we get beyond the pandemic, which hopefully is coming soon, we have to energetically embrace technology in ways that we just haven't done, to anywhere near that degree. And finally, I think I would say that the last big takeaway, and maybe this is the biggest one in terms of SAGE's work, is that the time has arrived for LGBT older people to move from the margins of our community's focus and our government's focus to the center, right? To the center of that focus. It should not have taken a pandemic to accomplish that. Because we're talking about our pioneers, the people who created our communities in the first place. But I think, in fact, the pandemic has put a spotlight on older folks in our community that was never there to the degree it should have been. And we got a foreshadowing, I think, of what that means last March, right? There's been a reference earlier to the enactment of the amendment of the Older Americans Act to get a good level, not everything we want, but a good level of LGBT inclusion into the Older Americans Act. That was helpful at the beginning. And now we'll talk about this a little bit. As we look forward, we see that the voices of elders in our community are front and center in their campaign to establish the Equality Act, right? So that's huge, moving our elders from the margin, from the edges, right there in the middle where they belong.
Great, Michael, thank you. When you think about telling us a little bit more about the national advocacy, we have a new administration. What's our work going to look like there?
Well, there's obviously a lot of opportunity there at the federal level. We still will be pushing to follow in the footsteps of Illinois and now the other states that have followed Illinois to get greatest social needs designation by the federal government for federally funded elder services. That's really important. There are a host of other elder-specific pieces of legislation and policies that SAGE is pushing. And importantly, we're also, and elders are really a key player in the push to enact the Equality Act, which would provide broad, comprehensive legal protections against discrimination in our community through the amendment of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And we cannot overstate how important that is. I think I've been, watching the chat tonight, and I, see that we have folks, for example, from Cincinnati and Ohio who have joined us tonight, and we just had a town hall this past fall in Ohio, looking at the lack of legal protections for older folks in our communities there, and the need to enact those. One of the ways we can do that is by achieving the adoption of the Equality Act. So that's really important. Similarly, Pamela made reference to a case in St. Louis, where I know we also have viewers from. Older lesbian people in St. Louis denied access to a continuing care retirement community just because they're a lesbian couple, right? That was the kind of thing that will be addressed by the Equality Act. So it's very important. It's going to be a tough haul. We need to win not only every Democratic vote, but 10 Republican votes. But with the Biden-Harris administration in office, with pro-majority equalities in both houses of Congress, it's our best shot in years. And I'm really pleased to say that more than a dozen LGBT plus national organizations have come together to push forward a really comprehensive, very coordinated campaign to get the Equality Act enacted. SAGE is front and center in that. We're one of those organizations. We're at that campaign table. Our elders and their stories are really being featured. I'm super proud to say that the American Society on Aging has joined the campaign as well. So we have a lot to do at the national level, but the good thing is we have the opportunity to get some really important things done.
Great, thanks. And Michael, I also understand that SAGE was able to make available specific funding opportunities to our national network affiliates, specifically for programming around racial equity. And several of those recipients were here in the Midwest. Could you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one of the steps that we're taking to really try to lean into our responsibility as a community and as an organization to address racism and to really overcome racism. And fortunately, SAGE has a network of 30 affiliates in 22 states across the country. Our affiliates join us in this commitment, in this anti-racism commitment, but that requires resources, it requires support. So we put together a fund that affiliates that are interested can secure funds to support their anti-racism efforts, their diversity and equity efforts more broadly. I'm really pleased to say that recipients of those funds include a number of our affiliates in the Midwest, Center on Halsted in Chicago, Sage Metro Detroit, Missouri's Sage of Promo fund. So it's a lot of good opportunity for collaboration to build equity together.
Great. We've mentioned a couple times tonight the American Society on Aging, and we didn't mention that not only is Michael Sage's CEO, he's also the chair of the board of the American Society on Aging. So Michael, could you tell us a little bit about the intersection of your SAGE work and your American Society on Aging work?
Yeah, and this week that intersection has me a very busy man because, as been referenced, the American Society on Aging's big annual conference on aging is going on this week, and we've had folks on the panel here who are speaking at it. It's truly been my honor to be chair of the board as I'm 1 year in, and it's a great opportunity in a bunch of ways. I mean, certainly one thing is as the head of SAGE, I have the opportunity to support the American Society on Aging in leaning into its own commitment to equality for LGBT older adults, and so SAGE was proud to invite the American Society on Aging to join us in campaigning for the Equality Act. We were even more proud when ASA said yes, and that's one really exciting example. My role also allows me to help the organization connect the dots on intersectionality and how our communities, our different diverse communities, kind of are bound together with common interests, even while respecting important differences. The ASA has been a leader in diversity in the aging field for many years. But to actually bring together, like, what are the kinds of things we've done through our Diverse Elders Coalition and bringing together organizations like SAGE and the National Hispanic Council on Aging, or National Indian Council on Aging, and National Black Center on Aging, et cetera. This is important work for ASA that I think I have the opportunity to contribute to as board chair. And I get to work with really, really amazing leaders across the sector. And to join with incredible thought leaders. I mean, so for example, last June, shortly into my time as chair, Peter Caldes, the CEO of American Society on Aging, and I were able to join together to publish I guess a bit of a manifesto on how the Stonewall legacy is about building an agenda that is pro-aging and anti-racism. And the opportunity to get that dialogue out into the community it is a really valuable opportunity. So I'm very pleased and proud to be playing this role with ASA.
Great. So Michael, we have time for one more quick question. And we've all talked about, the population explosion of elders, and particularly LGBT elders. Tell us what you think might be some of the most effective ways we have of addressing the tremendous needs in the LGBT community.
Well, we can't understate how fast the population of LGBT older folks is growing. First, we have the fact that the U.S. is a rapidly aging country, right? But in our community, that means even more, because as Pamela referenced earlier, we have the first generation of truly out and proud LGBT older folks in very large numbers all across the country, right? So we're looking at by 2030, there will be 7 million out LGBT older adults living in this country. That's big. Right, and it requires a number of things. It requires scaling our strategies so that we can reach far, far larger numbers of people. That means technology is going to become really important. That means encouraging non-LGBT organizations to get involved in this work is important. That's why SAGE's training work that Paula spoke about earlier is so important. We have to train every state office on aging in this country. We have to train every long-term care provider in this country. We have to train every retirement community in this country, because that's where our millions of people are going to be and live and need support from. So those are a couple of examples of how we need to scale up our impact, and we have to get many, many more people in our LGBT communities involved in this work as volunteers, as champions, as activists, as donors. It's going to take all of us together to meet this huge need.
Well, thank you, Michael. Now I'm going to turn thank you very much.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I'm going to turn it over to my fellow board member, Phil. Phil's going to do the closing remarks for us this evening.
Actually, I think, Denise, it might be you that's going to do them.
Okay.
I think Phil's having a tech problem.
Well, I'm going to be Phil. Okay, so I'm not a resident, but Phil is. And Phil has been a long-time Sage Board of Directors member. You know, our time's about up, and we really want to thank everyone for joining us. You know, I'm pretty sure all of you can see that this is an unbelievably tremendous organization with many, many folks building us up with their time, their energy, and their passion. You know, and it pays back the efforts to our elders who've borne the brunt of much of our community's struggle for equality, pressing into the prejudices and insisting that our lives deserve inclusion and respect. But it also pays forward all of our work, the legacy these pioneers leave us, one community of partnership and persistence. And these are Phil's words, but I will definitely echo them. Since we're talking about paying, this evening tonight, this event tonight was definitely promised as a free event. But if what you've heard saw or touched you or inspired you in some way, if you saw some way our work is a benefit to you or the people that you love or your community, please support our Sage Strong Resiliency Fund. This fund was created to provide Sage with resources needed to respond quickly and powerfully to the realities of the world during the COVID pandemic and whatever else the future might bring. You can go to www.sageusa.org, Sage Strong, and give. We're grateful to all of you who've contributed generously already, and many of you have, and many of you continue to support us. And while we haven't been able to ply you tonight with drinks and hors d'oeuvres and have, you know, music and all kinds of fun going on, we're confident that while you may have come for cocktails, you'll leave these events with a better understanding of why Sage and our mission and is important and how this national effort impacts our community in very, very direct ways. We hope that tonight's been true to our promise of educating you about what we're doing as a national organization and the work that we've done here in the Midwest. So I want to thank everyone, including all those who put things together tonight for us. Thank all of you for participating and thanking all of the community that joined us this evening.